my fellow readers, in this video I'm going to talk about After the Forest. This is by Kel Woods, and I really picked this up because of the cover. It drew me in. There's this whole kind of fairy tale-esque vibe where there's, you know, like wolf and bear, and then there's like rabbits and this whole like fox mask, and there's like hair, and I was just like, what is that book? Then actually I read the synopsis for it, and I was like, this actually does sound good. And I think I did read this out once before, maybe for my haul video, but I can't quite remember. But I will read it again, just in case you missed that, or if you need a refresher. So 20 years after the witch in the gingerbread house, Greta and Hans are struggling to get by. Their mother and stepmother are long dead, Hans is deeply in debt from gambling, and the countryside lies in ruin. It's people starving in the aftermath of a brutal war. Greta has a secret, though, the witch's grimoire, hidden away and whispering in Greta's ear for the past 2 decades, and the recipe inside that makes the best gingerbread you've ever tasted. As long as she can bake, Greta can keep her small family afloat. But in a village full of superstition, Greta and her mysteriously addictive gingerbread, not to mention the rumors about her childhood misadventures, are a source of gossip and suspicion. And now, dark magic is returning to the woods, and Greta's magic she is still trying to understand, may be the only thing that can save her, if it doesn't kill her. And then, of course, it says in a little blurb, After the Forest is a dark and enchanting fantasy debut from Kel Woods that explores the repercussions of a childhood filled with magic and a young woman contending with the truth of happily ever after. This is a great, which again, I'm a huge fan of fairy tales and fairy tale retellings, but this is a great fairy tale retelling. It combines the story essentially of Snow White and Rose Red with Hansel and Gretel. That took way too long since it's like literally right in their names. So yes, Greta in this, I think it's Margareta, I think is her full name. But she and her brother grew up with her mother and father, and then one day her mother, I think, is sent a gift of an apple, and she ends up, they think for years that her mother was, I believe, attacked and killed by a bear, but there's more to that story in the apple that she was given, and it's very, very interesting. Fast forward a couple of years, her father had remarried and was now with the stepmother, and I believe that's when something occurs. I don't remember why he ends up sending. Obviously, in the original story, the father was coerced by like the stepmother to send the kids into the forest. I think that's at least one of them. Anyway, they end up like stranded out in the forest, her and her brother Hans, and they end up at the witch's house and eating, or being taken in to be eaten, but they're offered gingerbread and whatnot. And it's very hard because there's more to the story than what I'm saying, but what I'm saying now is essentially what Greta kind of tells us and how she bases herself on. Of course, she ends up having to get her brother free, and then free from the witch's house, and in so doing, the witch was killed. That's what she believes, and sort of feels responsible for it, but also doesn't have like clear memories of what happened. And I don't think her brother does either. And of course they were traumatized, but regardless, they do end up escaping the witch and going back home. But at the same time, there's a mistrust of them throughout the town, just based on that. They think that Greta had to have something with her in order to even kill the witch, but also there must be something wrong with her in order to be able to do that. I don't know. That was all like interesting, because at the same time they do hire her to like make gingerbread for their parties or do whatever. So she's not like completely ostracized, and her brother, I don't think he's ever fully able to recover either. I'm trying to remember what happened with the stepmother. Like, was she still there when they got back? There's bits I don't remember clearly because it all ends up intertwining. And not being quite what we think. So I don't want to say something that then ends up being kind of one of the twists in the plot. So I'm trying to stay away from that. But it's very good. But anyway, years later, her father. Did he die from the drink? I don't think he's around. I think he either took off or he died from not being good. And they don't have a stepmother, so it's just the brother and sister. And they have to make sure that they get enough money to pay their tithing to the crown. And it's been difficult because her brother gambles, so he'll take whatever money he gets or earns and gambles it away. So meanwhile, Greta bakes a lot. And she does dip into the grimoire and do things that maybe she shouldn't be doing, playing with magic that maybe she shouldn't be playing with. But she does seem to have this ability to use magic, and to what effect will that, go to? I don't know. It's fascinating. I did like her. On top of their part of the story, there is another character that comes in and doesn't want to share his past with the two, but he and Greta seem very drawn to one another, and so then it's also kind of figuring out his story and how he comes into this whole world and story. And they all do intertwine. And again, if you know bits from the original fairy tales, then you can sort of piece out where things are going, but it's still such a great journey to get there that I find it fascinating. And there are bits of another story layered on top that just come in. I think usually it's at the chapter beginnings. They just have this little bit of story, and then it goes back to the main narrative of Greta. And I don't know, I'm probably describing this so wrong, but it's so good and it deserves a much better description. I would just say if you do like fairy tales, I would definitely recommend After the Forest. I think that I liked it much better than I thought I would. I was like, oh, I'll get to it eventually. It's probably one of those, run-of-the-mill type fantasy stories that's been coming out. But then I really liked the fairy tale retelling world that it tells here and builds. I liked the characters. I liked the take on magic and what everybody's opinion is on magic and the dangers of it, but also that its existence was there. And it almost seems like sometimes people were willing to use magic even though they didn't 100% trust magic. If they knew somebody could do something, they were willing to manipulate the situation with magic even though they didn't trust it, which is interesting, but also pretty par for the course as people go. Yeah, I liked the magic. I liked the characters. They were all good characters. I think even with the main villain of the story, which ties into the whole crown and the tithing and whatnot, it's really well done and well crafted. And again, I can't get it too into any of these characters in detail because I think it would destroy the journey of the book, because you kind of have to follow along and unravel that as you go. But I think all of them are very well told and are very fleshed out characters. Again, I would say the one frustrating character, or the most frustrating character, I think was the brother. I could say to a degree the father, but you don't deal with him as much. But the brother 100% was, because he could not deal with certain things. He was much more frivolous. It's he felt bad taking advantage of his sister and her doing all the work, but at the same time he never seemed to pull his act together, or it takes a very long time to, and it's just very frustrating. So he was probably my least favorite, but still well done, because 100% he was a realistic character. There's definitely people like that, so I can't complain. But yeah, love the bit of a love story. I loved the magic. I loved the characters in general. I loved the villain. I thought was well done. And the whole backstory was really good. And again, I would recommend this 100%. It's a great fairy tale. A lot of fun. And if you haven't read the fairy tales, it would be great to either read this first and then read them to compare, or read them and then read this one to compare, because I think it's good to have that background in that when you're reading literature, and they're really good fairy tales as well. That's it for this video. Until next time, bye.